So you spent your time on the sim all winter? The weather's starting to get a little bit better, and things are about to get real when you go outside.
Well, shit.
Today we're going to talk about hovering. There's little more frustrating than seeing a seasoned pilot do the same thing you do, but they look smooth and you look a little like this. Sometimes it ends like that, other times it ends like this. Alright, so we're going to start with 3 ways to enter a hover. We're going to talk about the elevator, the Harrier, and the wall. Starting it with an elevator, going into a hover, this is by far my favorite way to enter a hover, especially when you're learning. You know, you're coming down gradually, it gives you a lot of time to set up, you have a nice steady throttle, not a lot of surprises. Quite often, the start of the hover really determines the quality of the maneuver. There's that 3 to 5 second settle-in period where you find the center, balance the plane, and find your throttle. Here's a little plane therapy for you. Calm reveals the corrections needed. Panic perpetuates the problem. So slow down, loosen up your grip on your transmitter, and breathe. The next way to enter a hover is using a wall. I don't really care for this method because it creates a lot of problems for you. It's hard to keep the plane straight. Let's take a look at how this works. So plane's flying along, you throttle up a little bit, you pull back, and the plane goes up. That's how it's supposed to work, right? Well, that's not exactly how it happens. So let's take a look at what really happens. Holding. All right, start to throttle up, and hold it. Okay. What we're looking at here is a phenomenon called gyroscopic precession. Watch this demo to see how it works. This wheel is extremely heavy. It's got heavy mags in it. So when I start spinning this, and I think about pulling the plane up, you can see immediately it pulls to the side. So really what's happening is that plane is pulling to the side as we pull up, all right? So let's think about what we need to do here. As the plane goes up and it goes to the side, we need to enter some rudder along with that throttle to straighten it out. Let's take a look at how that works here. We come in, it pulls up, and the rudder to correct. Now, it'd be great if it stops right there, but if you add a little too much rudder, you're correcting again, and you might be correcting again. So, smart, easy movements. If I think about nosing the plane down, so let's look at it inverted. It goes the opposite direction, we correct. This is gyroscopic stability. The slower it goes, now I can lift it without an issue. So I've got this plane sitting static. Prop's not spinning, and it just holds. Now as soon as I turn the plane on, Newton's law says for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so going from 0 speed to high speed, you can see how quickly it torques. Here's an example of no ailerons, backing off, a lot of power, torquing up. See how that plane just spins right out from underneath me? As the prop stops accelerating and kind of hits a peak speed or an equilibrium speed, the amount of torque is reduced. And so it'll still spin, but it's not going to spin as fast. I like the torque. Now, if we back off the prop, the amount of torque is actually reduced. What that means is not necessarily that the plane's going to do an anti-torque roll as much as we are reducing, there's not as much torque on the aileron. It's not easy to do this, and you're not going to be perfect. Should keep it nice and calm. If we come into the wind, Just come into the wind. Keep things smooth. The more I jump around, the harder it is to control. Okay, but I can play with the wind and let the wind work with me, okay? I don't have to worry about torque rolling. I can just stay with the wind, and then I can fly right back out. Here's another way to play with the wind. Here we've got a heavy wind blowing straight at us. Take a look at how the elevator is fluctuating quickly. It's keeping the nose of the plane up while it's allowing air to pass. Make your corrections quick and deliberate. Here are some examples of different ways to correct. All right, let's take a second to talk about bringing the plane down after watching that example. If you listen to this motor, every time I back off the throttle, it drops. Every time I throttle up, it straightens out. So backing the plane down is a matter of straightening it out, backing it down, straightening it out, backing it down. The important part here is it's one click at a time on the throttle, 1 to 2 clicks. It's not about major throttle movements. You want to keep your movements small and deliberate on all surfaces. All right, we've talked a lot about hovering. Let's talk a little bit about torque rolling. You're not going to find a good 3D pilot that most likely doesn't have a Twisted Hobbies plane. These planes are fantastic, and they're probably one of the best tools that you can have to learn these tricks. So where do you start? When you got your plane, from a hover, throttle up just a little bit and let the plane torque. If you add ailerons, it's going to make the plane even more stable and teach you how to not panic. All right, now we've done a handful of the ones with ailerons. Try it without using your ailerons. So find that nice steady position. Don't let it torque roll until you have to. Once you're nice and centered, then just go ahead and throttle up slightly and let it torque roll. Do one roll and then just get out. Fly back out. Take your plane a little higher and practice. This is a great way to just work on those moves. When your plane gets backwards to you, it's easy to overcorrect or undercorrect. So here's a couple of examples of overcorrecting and undercorrecting. You can see here the wing drops and I push too much throttle, so it causes the plane to fly out. This is an example of the opposite. As the plane turns, the wing drops, no rudder is added, the plane flies out. Same thing happens here. So this is pretty common. I'm going to do it a third time in this example. So here you'll see it goes up, it comes around, no rudders added, flies out, catch the plane, work on it again. This is how you practice. You do it over and over and over, and you'll get there. Here's an example of when it's windy, when you're first learning how. Just go ahead, pull it up. When you start learning how to torque roll, just let the wind drift your plane. Don't try to keep it in one spot. Just drift along and play with it. Learning isn't about being perfect. All right, the next section we're going to talk about props. Not all props are perfect for you, but as long as you're using a quality prop, your plane can hover. This is a 13 pitch prop. You can see it's got a lot of bite. Okay? It's also pushing a lot of air across the tail. So it allows the plane to feel very active. In the next example, I'm using the 10 pitch prop. Now, there's less air going across the surfaces. I'm also using a smaller motor on the same plane. This plane is a little bit tail heavy with this motor in this particular case. But you can see it's not quite as jumpy, feels a little calmer. This is probably more of my preferred prop a lot of the time. Okay, and then in the last example, I'm using a very low pitch prop. Now I don't care for the low pitch prop on this plane, but you'll see here, it's a smaller diameter, it's a 23/8, so it's an inch smaller and a smaller pitch. In the Harriers, this thing is solid as a rock. You can see there's very little torque. It's solid. Now when I come into the hover, watch it. It'll cavitate and drop. Listen. See that? It's all prop rip. It's just not biting. And you'll hear my response.
I hate it.
We've covered a lot of stuff here. Some of the things to really keep in mind: feather that elevator and use thrust to correct the plane. Use the wind to practice. It's a great way to keep the aileron stable and just work on your tail surfaces. Give yourself long setups using elevators or Harriers going in. Make sure that when you go in, it's not so abrupt, so you're not dealing with gyroscopic precession. And if you are going to do it quickly, just make sure that you're prepared for what the plane's going to do. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any requests, any other things, I'm more than happy to listen to you and see what I can build. If you like the content I'm putting together, please click that subscribe button and click the bell to be notified. Make sure that you share with your friends. Until next time, happy landings.
Touch the tail.
That wind is just... That was on video.